Hi everyone, it's Graham again and welcome back to my channel. So today I am joined by...
the husband.
the long suffering. And we are going to be chatting about...
Agatha Christie's Three Little Pigs. Oh, Five Little Pigs. Five
little pigs.
Yeah.
And we also have a lovely cup of tea to keep us hydrated.
Yes, in this sunny day.
Good?
Yeah.
Good. So, Five Little Pigs was first published in 1943 and it deals with a crime that took place 16 years before. So it's sometime in the 1920s. Poirot is approached by a young lady called Carla Le Marchant. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Le Marchant.
Le Marchant. Okay. Who is the daughter of a famous artist called Amyas Creole, and obviously his wife is called Caroline Creole. They are no longer around. Amyas Creole was murdered by poisoning, and the poison that was used was coneine,
Yes.
which is a preparation made from the hemlock plant. It was administered to him via
Beer.
a glass of beer.
Yeah.
And for all intents and purposes, Caroline Creole was convicted and she was sentenced to death, but then I think the sentence was commuted, but then she died a year later in prison, didn't she?
Yeah.
But the last thing that she did was write a letter to Carla saying that she was innocent. She professed her innocence.
Yes.
And from what Carla remembers of her mother, she knows that she's not telling lies.
Yeah, there was something not right in her memory of the relationship. And, and now that the letter comes, it's...
Yeah. So Poirot then sets forth, on the request of Carla, to speak to the 5 people that were there the days leading up to and the day of Amyas Creole's
16
murder.
years ago.
16 years before. So he interviews each person and gets all the information that he needs, and then he asks them all to write an account, a statement of the facts as they remember them.
Yeah.
But 16 years is a long time. So memory is subjective. You remember what you want to remember, you forget certain things, you exaggerate certain things, but also if you're trying to hide something, you can be devious and vindictive. And I think there's a lot of that in this novel with certain people.
Well, yeah. Well, Carla, she says, is going to be a problem, and he says the psychology of the people involved is what's going to trip them up. We'll get to the bottom of the story.
Yeah. So the 5 people that were there, Philip Blake, who was best friend to Amyas Creole, childhood best friend, Meredith Blake, who is Philip Blake's brother.
Older brother.
Yep. And Lord of the Manor, almost.
Right.
Well, yeah. And then there is Elsa Greer, who is now Lady Ditisham. There is also Cecilia Williams, who was the governess to Caroline Creole's younger sister, Angela Warren. And all 5 of these people are interviewed by Poirot. They give roughly the same memories, but they had different experiences of that day. They did different things. They had different conversations with people. So that's the angle that Poirot goes with, and that's how he figures out and builds the jigsaw of the crime, of what happened. But he also gets them to write down what they remember.
That's right.
And he pieces it all together. Amyas Creole is an artist. On the day of his death, he is painting a young woman called Elsa Greer, who he's having an affair with quite blatantly in front of his wife.
Yeah, this was quite normal for him to entertain the models and things.
An artist.
Yeah, he wasn't just an artist. He was a fantastic artist. One of his pictures was in the Tate Gallery.
Yeah.
And everyone around him seemed to have recognised that he had a quality, that he could put something into a picture that was really unique and fantastic.
Yes.
Everyone except Mrs. Williams.
Well, Miss Williams didn't like him because she had studied art in Florence.
Well, she didn't like him because he was not very nice.
Not very nice to his wife.
Creole.
Yeah.
He had affairs.
Yeah.
I think she was a feminist before her time.
Yes. She was my favourite character out of the whole lot of them, because traditionally with Agatha Christie, you're not meant to like the characters. I don't think they're meant to be deplorable. They're meant to be unlikable.
That's really clever, because if you don't like any of them, then you're not going to fasten on one and get confused by the plot.
So I should say right now that this video will contain spoilers. We will give away who the killer is. So if you haven't read the book and you want to, you might not want to listen to the very sort of end when we give it away.
It's the kind of book that you could read and still enjoy, even though you knew the ending. Well,
we read this for Christie Fest, didn't we? We read it with Lil from Lil's Vintage World and Julie from The Hungry Bookworm. And Julie had already seen all of the adaptations before she started reading any of the books, so she was spoiled for it. I had a very vague memory of having seen the 2003 adaptation, the David Suchet, but I couldn't remember the ins and outs of it. So on the day of the death, Amyas Crail is painting Elsa Greer, who is the young lady, shall we say, who has caught his affections, and very much to the dislike of his wife, because basically Elsa Greer has said, oh, when I move into this house, all this furniture will be getting chucked out, and then she basically blurts out that she and Amyas are going to be married. She says this to his wife, and she's just deplorable. Absolutely deplorable.
She wasn't very happy that Amyas had told her that they were going to be together and was in effect stringing his wife along.
But he's married with a child. This girl is 20 years old.
Yeah, but Amyas has been telling her, I love you, this is what we were going to spend our lives together.
Yeah.
And you know, this is what she's being told by Amyas, so why wouldn't she believe it?
So anyway, on the day of the murder, he's poisoned with the conaine in the beer, and the poison came from a trip to Meredith Blake's laboratory the day before. It was pinched, and there's thoughts and feelings that Caroline pinched it to do away with herself, but then got the idea to kill her husband, because that's how people see it. She killed her husband, and that's the end of it.
All the evidence was there. It's not.
Yeah, but that's not the conclusion that Poirot comes to.
No, well, and Caroline didn't profess her innocence at any stage. She didn't put any defence forward as to say it wasn't me, it was someone else. So that muddied the waters as well.
Yeah. So the fact that she didn't have any defence.
She didn't present any defence, and so that didn't make the whole thing clear. That muddied the waters.
Yeah.
And also another important point was the guy that made the poisons. This was his hobby. He was a herbologist.
Yeah.
And he was a bit pompous about the whole thing, and he told everyone that this is how Cicero had died.
It wasn't Cicero, it was Socrates.
Socrates.
Yeah.
And they told the death of Socrates, where the poison just gently came up his body and his heart stopped. So it wasn't a horrible death.
You know, it made it sound romantic and lovely.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason why possibly Caroline stole the drug. Because it was like an easy way out.
Well, she was all upset with this. I'm going to marry Amyas, and then they all went over to the friend's house. So she'll have been all thinking, "Is it real this time?" And so Amyas was an impulsive artist type, and I think she was too. Yeah.
So I don't know about you, but when reading this book, I suspected every single person. I suspected every single person of the murder, apart from the only person that it turned out to be. I never once suspected this person, and this is where we're going to say who it was. So it turns out that Elsa Greer is the killer. She overhears an argument between Amyas and Caroline, which other people have overheard. And they take to mean that it's about the sister Angela Warren, who was going to be sent away to school. And
other people heard bits of it. Elsa heard the whole thing.
She was sitting outside the library window or whatever it was, the drawing room, and she heard the whole thing. And then, because she had witnessed Caroline stealing the quinine, or the quinine, or whatever it's called, the poison, the hemlock, she figured out that she would know where she'd put it. And
because all ladies hide things in the same place,
in the same places.
That's the knicker drawer. If you didn't know.
So she's sitting for the portrait. The beer that she gives them is outside, so it's a really warm day, and the beer is warm. She poisons the beer. He drinks it.
She poisons the glass.
Yeah, she poisons the glass. He drinks it down because he's guilty of drinking it straight down, and he starts to basically to die in front of her.
Just slowly die.
Yeah, and there's a really incredible quote, and I'm not going to quote it exactly from the book, but it says that this woman in the picture, it's a woman watching her lover dying, because he's painting her and dying at the same time.
That's what Poirot saw.
And it's just incredible.
One of Amias's friends saw him painting at the battery where she posed on the,
so like a terrace,
like a castellated wall with the sea behind.
Yeah.
One of his friends saw him and said he had a manic look in his eye. Well, Amias will have realised that he'd been poisoned. He would have felt the poison coming up his legs, and he was feverishly finishing the picture. And this is how much Amias was invested in his art, is that he knew he was being poisoned, and he knew that he had to finish the picture, and so he feverishly tidied up the bits. Yeah. And then Elsa saw him die. Yeah. Saw him sit down on the bench. And then went off to lunch.
But in the meantime, after she had fed him the poisoned beer, the wife Caroline had collected a beer that she had caught her sister Angela tampering with.
Yes.
And she had sent this ice cold beer down. So there was nothing in the bottle. It was in the glass, but he'd already been poisoned. And he drinks this beer down like in his usual way. He just downs it, and he says, "Yuck! Everything tastes foul today." Because he'd already been poisoned. And I don't know about you, but that kind of that struck me almost straight away when he said that the poison hadn't been in that beer. He'd already been poisoned.
And you didn't know whether it was at breakfast?
Yeah.
When he said everything tastes bad, that was...
So it could have been at any time, but it was Elsa. And so after all this, Poirot has done all the summing up, and he gets them all together after he's read all their manuscripts and their statements. And at first he accuses the sister, but then discovers, well, he already knows who the killer is, but then it's discovered that she was going to put valerian into his beer, and that's why she had the ice cold beer that Caroline caught her with. But then he says, "But no, I know who the real killer is," and it turns out it's Elsa Greer, because she had overheard the conversation with Amias and Caroline, and it turns out that Caroline felt sorry for Elsa Greer, because Amias was stringing her along, and
just to paint a picture.
So she killed her lover, and
through pure badness,
spoiltness, just a nasty piece of work. And I absolutely love this. This was a great book. It does feel quite repetitious in places, because you're getting the same story again and again, but there's slight little differences, and that's what Agatha Christie does so well. Her clues and the tiny little things that she pops in. Because when I was like 10 pages away from the end and he was announcing that it was Angela, I had, for quite a lot of the last half of the book, suspected her. She was my murderer. She was the one who'd done it. But Elsa Greer was the only person that I hadn't suspected the entire way through.
Because she had absolutely no motive, apparently.
None. But then we find out that she did.
Yes.
And it's typical Agatha Christie to throw that in there, and you just think, yes, that all makes sense.
At the very last minute.
Yeah, it's just, it was astonishing. The TV adaptation, we watched it as soon as we'd finished the book.
Mm-hmm.
It was okay, but it wasn't the book. There were changes that were made that didn't need to be made. And I think that someone had seen this masterpiece of a book and thought, I'm going to try and make this better. And it didn't work for me. It kind of fell flat.
Well, the writers were making everything that Poirot had ever done, pretty much, into the series of films for David Suchet to portray.
I suppose they needed...
That's a tricky one to do.
Because of the so many different aspects and stuff, and different versions of the same story. Yeah. In that respect, I think they did it well. But just the things that they changed, I felt were a bit unnecessary.
Yeah, they didn't need to change them.
They didn't need to change them at all. So, that was our more of a discussion really than a review of Five Little Pigs by Agatha Christie. If you want, sorry?
Well worth a read.
Yes, absolutely. If you want to join in with Christie Fest in April, the choice is Murder at the Vicarage. Yes, and it's a Miss Marple. So, yeah, and I think that's... I'm not sure of the dates. I will pop them on the screen somewhere down below. Thank you so much for watching. Whatever you're doing, I hope you have so much fun doing it. Whatever you're reading, I hope you love it. Stay fabulous, be amazing, be yourself, stay safe, and I'll see you again soon for another video.
See you again.
Bye bye.